I got I have a Moomin mug.
Moomin. Moomin. Yeah, Moomin's great. I don't know much about it, but yeah, I was at the other year I was at a friend's house in Montreal and they had a little girl and she was watching Moomin stuff. And I was like, what is this? And
Yeah.
then like all the little Montreal bookstores, because there are bookstores everywhere. There's like Moomin books. And I'm like, what is this?
Yeah,
It's like,
Montreal. Yeah, they love Moomin up there.
yeah, it's kind of cool. I kind of like dawned on me a while back that like where I live, Montreal's not that far away.
No, not at
And
all.
like it's like you're in Europe.
Yeah, but where you are, you could go to Toronto and TCAF if you wanted to. I mean, that's a pretty accessible show for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you done it before?
No, no. I've been to Toronto. I like Toronto. Um, I really haven't been doing the shows in the last few years for like two reasons. One, being back in Cleveland, and two, having been working on this book for so long. It's like I don't really want to like travel when I don't have like a big thing to show. But when I was, when I was in Philadelphia, it was easy enough to go to New York, go to SBX, whatever. It was close by, but Cleveland's a little more, a little more cut off comparatively.
Yeah. How long were you in Philadelphia?
Like 11 years.
Yeah, I thought you were like a Philly. When I first met you, I just assumed you were raised there or something. I didn't know that you were from Cleveland originally.
Yeah, a lot of people think I'm a Philly guy. I mean, I was out. I mean, I like lived a whole life out there. Was there for a long time. I got pretty. I liked it there. I took to that city well.
Hmm. Well, you started drawing when you were in your 20s. That's what I just read.
I
And
don't. Where did you read this?
I was doing research, man. That's what I do. So,
Yeah, the internet's always right. Started drawing in my 20s.
well, I mean, drawing comics, and I'm the same way. I started, I drew comics as a kid, but then I jumped back into it with like the idea of it being something I was going to publish and like people were going to see in my early 20s. I was probably 21 or something.
Oh, okay, that's true enough that I did start drawing comics in
Yeah.
my 20s. Um, but as a kid, I was always drawing. I was very intimidated as like a teenager and as a child by doing comics. I'd like really, really overthink things. I was like, how do you make Bruce Wayne look the same in every panel? And like, how to like, I was like, just like, do the new artists get like a blueprint of the Batcave so they know where everything is? I was like obsessed with like that type of like continuity.
Yeah.
I was like, do they have a map and like they like everyone gets like a Bible? And it's like, no, you draw the Batman's grandfather clock wherever you want, and
The giant
and you learn like
in
you
the,
make the faces the same by like you look at like Archie, the faces they're all like the characters all look the same, but it's like, okay, well, this guy has glasses, this one has red hair, this guy's got Jughead's got a hat, and that's how you like create, you know, who the different characters are. But like as a kid, it was just like it's just like so overwhelming. I don't know if most people even think about that stuff.
well, when you decided to do comics as something more serious in your 20s, uh, was there like something that's started that? Like what tipped you off to be like, wait a second, I need to get back into this and take it more seriously?
Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, I liked comics as a kid and I just like read like the superhero crap and whatever. And it kind of fell out of it. And then like when I was like a senior in high school, me and my friends kind of got back into it, but like a little bit like ironically.
Yeah.
Like we drive around town, like one of my buddies got a car and there were just comic shops everywhere then. This was like the late 90s. And we would just like raid the like quarter bins and dollar bins and just like like complete runs that we like half started like as a kid.
Yeah.
Like we were kind of just like being punks about it and like, is this kind of like stupid, just killing time. And
What
then
stuff were you reading though? Like Azrael, Agent of the Bat, or something?
I read a lot of Batman. You could at the time you could get a lot of like late 80s, early 90s Batman stuff for like 50 cents or a buck. I was
Yeah.
reading a lot of that. Punisher War Journal I liked because it was on like better paper and those stories were like self-contained. But yeah, to answer your question, at some point in my early 20s, I kind of started discovering like alternative comics and
Mhm.
like underground comics. And I just got like kind of like super obsessed with comics. And I started just kind of like checking out everything, like stuff I'm not even interested in now, because I was like, let me just learn about everything. So I'd like check out Milton Caniff
Mhm.
and like old newspaper stuff and just anything and everything I was curious about. And then I started getting more serious about drawing comics.
You were just educating yourself back then with stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then since then, like tastes have kind of come to more singular point. But at the time, like I wouldn't read Pogo by Walt Kelly now, even though it's great. It's not really my thing. But at the time, I was just getting, and it was harder to get stuff back then.
Mhm.
Like we're living in this golden age of like reprints, and like people take it for granted. It used to be a lot harder.
But I still love all that, the old comics and everything. I still reread that stuff. I feel like I'm like constantly trying to educate myself on comics. But you're more of a natural artist than I am. Like your work has always been good. Basically, as long as I've known you, all your drawings and stuff have always been pretty solid. You could have gotten work at anywhere you wanted.
See, I have more. I'm not really a cartoonist.
Yeah.
You know, I have more of like an illustration background.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and like they're related, but they're distinct.
You
Like, well, you like
exaggerate.
a cartoonist pairs thing like you kind of pairs things down to its essentials, and you have like this cartoony style that works,
Mhm.
and you can like have a little more freedom to move around. And I've kind of gone in another direction. Um, like I barely do sequential art. I haven't done like sequential art in a very long time.
I know. I noticed that, and like reading your new book too. I'm just like, oh, I realized like, oh, this is not sequential. This is
No,
like something else. Like I don't even know how to really describe it. Like I don't know if I would even. I guess I'd say graphic novel, but not in the sense of like when you think of a graphic novel, like it's got graphics.
right. It's not a novel. It's
Well, it's not a
nonfiction.
novel. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not fiction. I don't know. Like it's dense, man. I mean, reading it is just like reading a book without pictures in it.
And to say it's like not a comic book sounds pretentious because it obviously has comic book influences throughout. But yeah, there's like they don't even like there's not even like a marketing term for like what it is. It's kind of like, and this sounds obnoxious too, but it's almost like an illuminated manuscript.
Yeah. Well, was that a problem when you were trying to originally pitch it around to publishers? That like they'd be like, "What is this? This doesn't look like how we would expect."
Top to bottom, the subject matter, the
Yeah.
format, that like I think they wanted like an actual narrative where I'd have like Peter Lochner or like the Dead Boys like walking around and like on a stage jamming at CBGBs. And like I'm like, I don't fucking do that. Like if they say something, it's a quote. It's like heavily narrated. I don't do like action drawings of them performing. I mean,
Mhm.
here and there, but like I avoid that. I'm like, all right, let's like I almost draw it like a documentary. Like here's just like a portrait of somebody.
It is like a documentary, you're right? And there's a lot of collage in there too. So it's sort of visually like calling back to the era that it's talking about. And it's interesting too because the Peter Lochner is like barely in it. He's like a tenth of the book, really. The whole book is like a big portrait of a city in a specific era and the culture of that city of that specific era.
I'd say Lochner's in uh much more than that. Um, but I mean, definitely part two focuses on him almost exclusively.
Right. But this is a
Uh,
450 page book basically, and it's I don't know. Like I feel like I got so much information about the sort of storm clouds that were gathering that formed punk rock in a specific location, and he was just like sort of an element of that. But you go into everything else, and it's crazy how many like famous people are associated with Cleveland and stuff. It's really about that. I felt uh, how all these people kind of in their careers and lives intersected with one spot, in this country and stuff. And
yeah, I think in order, um, to understand Peter Lochner and what happened in Cleveland, you kind of have to understand the city
Mhm.
and like this very specific moment in time. uh I think that's kind of essential to understanding like the story. They're just very, very connected. So like you have to talk about John D. Rockefeller and the railroads and how this Cleveland once was this like shining metropolis, this like major city, and
Right.
how it just fucking went to shit.
Yeah, all of that stuff, that the portrait of the city becomes a portrait of this uh, artist, and the history of that city, the darkness of it, and stuff like that contributed to who this person was, I guess. And that's anyway, that's how I was taking it when I was reading it. But it is dark, and I didn't know anything about Cleveland. Even when I lived in Columbus, I went to Cleveland maybe twice. Like I just didn't really go up there. And it is kind of like a weird, like Hardwood.
Very,
Yeah, it's a dark, kind of heavy place. I felt
very
like,
dark. It's very different than Columbus.
yeah,
It
very different. And
could have
it's
been more different.
2 hours
Uh,
away maybe or something.
two and a half. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Cleveland's a very dark place.
Do you feel like any kind of like relation to Cleveland? Because it's interesting when somebody leaves there where they were raised, leaves where they were raised, and then they always find their way back there somehow. Like my wife is from South Carolina, and she left for a number of years, but then she came back, and I feel like that happens a lot to people. Like
Rumspringa.
yeah, Rumspringa, yeah, that's like you had your Rumspringa in Philadelphia, and then you had to come back to your home your home
And
turf.
I was in Columbus before Philadelphia.
Yeah, but
So
did you go to the art school there?
did. So I left Cleveland. I was gone from Cleveland for like 18 years. But yeah, I do feel a connection to Cleveland. I'm from here, my family's from here.
Mm.
Um, I think maybe one of the reasons it interests me as a place is because I did leave.
Yeah.
And so growing up, I thought everywhere was like Cleveland. I thought every city had like an industrial center,
Mm.
and I thought everybody was Catholic, and I just thought that's what the world was like. And then you leave and you're like, oh, wait a minute. This is not, other places are not like this.
And what this is the question I'm sure everybody asks you is like, what drew you to doing a book about Peter Lochner? Like, did you relate to him as a artist in any way, or anything about his personality?
Yeah. I mean, I was a pretty bad alcoholic and self destructive. And so I definitely like, I saw a lot of myself in Peter, not just that part, but also his like manic enthusiasms,
Mhm.
the way he was kind of a fanboy, which I kind of was when I was younger. And I definitely saw myself in him. Um, and also, so like growing up, it didn't feel like anything was going on here. It seemed like, and I grew up in the suburbs, and it was just like, God, I want to get out of here. And do you remember Rhino? They put out like, they're probably still around. They put out like Ed Wood tapes and stuff. And
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
they put out a collection of, when I was a senior in high school, they put out a collection of an anthology of post-punk music. And I bought one at Best Buy, and I remember sitting in my room listening to it. And this one track really like stood out to me. It was called Final Solution by Pere Ubu. And it had a little booklet, the CD did, and I was looking through it, and it said Pere Ubu from Cleveland, Ohio. And I was like, these guys are from Cleveland? I was like, I didn't know anybody was from Cleveland. And I thought that was so cool that this awesome song came from here. And Peter Lochner played on that song, though it would be years before I learned his name.
Hmm. How did you learn his name?
Well, so before Pere Ubu, Peter was in a band called Rocket from the Tombs, which split off into Pere Ubu and the Dead Boys. And they were kind of this like unknown thing that was just on bootlegs. But in the early 2000s, that material, their demo recordings and whatnot, got a proper release. And some of the surviving members got back together and went on tour, which I saw in Columbus. And so people started talking about them again and talking about Peter Lochner, and especially in Ohio. And this sort of, you just kind of hear things here and there. People would like tell stories, or you'd be like, yeah, this fucking guy. And then I just started kind of just getting more and more interested in it, like with not just what Peter had done, but what his contemporaries and the Electric Eels had done, and just their whole scene.
How did you find out information about someone like this in order to like make a book about him? I mean, it seems like it'd be difficult to research somebody so obscure.
Sure. Where to begin? So there's kind of been these like torchbearers over the years.
Mhm.
So like in the 80s, there was this guy, Chris Stagliano, who did a zine called Black to Com. And he was kind of like, he got like, I think he got all the surviving recordings of Peter Lochner through like his mother. He like contacted her, and she also sent him like all like the like newspaper clippings and shit she kept.
Wow.
So Chris Stagliano would like periodically talk about this stuff in his fanzines. And then this guy Derek got a hold of the recordings, and he was like selling like bootleg like CDRs. And this guy in England, Clinton Halen, wrote a book called From the Velvets to the Voidoids. And it's about like the history of punk rock. And it's an interesting book because it mostly focuses on New York and what was going on at like CBGBs and whatnot. But it also spins off and talks about Cleveland. And Halen says that Cleveland was the only other city with a contemporaneous emerging punk scene to New York. Now,
Wow.
I think there were other bands in other cities, but they weren't like, there was Simply Saucer in Ontario, but it was just them.
Yeah.
There wasn't like a whole network of bands and clubs. So Clinton did a lot of research back in the 90s, and it's like kind of just tucked away in this book that people think is about New York. So Clinton's book was a major source. And then the torch kind of got passed to the guys at Smog Veil Records, who released the Rocket from the Tomb stuff. And they kind of made it their personal mission to like find out everything about Peter Lochner and to like do a good release of all his music, which was like kind of notorious because it was so delayed. It was like came out like 10 years late, but it did come out the other year, and to much fanfare.
Yeah.
And so Clinton's research, the research that Smog Veil guys did, those were like major sources. And, I went through old fanzines. I went to the Plain Dealer archives. I interviewed people, etc.
And did you always intend for it to be a graphic novel, or were you thinking like I'll just do this as a comic, and then it just kind of grew?
Right. So I had done like I don't know how many pages it was. Like, I don't know, 18 pages or something in an issue of my old mini comic Trim.
Uh huh.
And yeah, I had just meant to do like a kind of like short thing about Peter, and it ended up being much longer than I expected, like 18 pages or something. And a guy I knew had a little website going at the time. He's like, "Can I put this up on my website?" And I was like, at the time, I didn't really ever put like full things up online. I still really don't. I don't like doing that, but it seemed like the right thing to do. And I let him put it up on his website, and it started like getting circulated around,
Huh.
like amongst types of people interested in this sort of thing. And people started contacting me and telling me stories and like this and that and this and that. And I was like, man, I missed so much stuff, and I got stuff wrong. There's like, I was sloppy. It was like, just like, I didn't know what I was doing back then. This was like 8 years ago. I wasn't really being rigorous. And I thought, man, I'm hearing all this new stuff. I realize some of these errors I've made. Maybe I could write something not like in longhand in a notebook and actually, be a little more serious about it. And I remember looking up like what's the minimum like page length of a graphic novel, and it's like, it's got to be like 80 pages. And I was like, cool, I can pad this out to 80 pages and like try to get somebody to put it out.
Yeah.
And then I just kept finding more stuff, and the years kept moving, and that turned into like 450 pages,
Yeah.
and took over my life for a rather long period.
See, so I've been through something similar like that. I also released a book about the same exact page length, and by the time that thing is done and out of your life, do you have any kind of like postpartum depression about?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that. it's not like I'm depressed. It's more just I'm kind of like in a fog.
Yeah.
Um, and like I've been just doing like business shit because like I put it up. I published the book through my own company, which I co-run with my friend Jake Kelly. So like we're just dealing with orders and emails and like shit like that I just I don't want to do.
Mhm.
And like I finished the book back in like June, and it's like kind of like behind me. I want to just like work on new stuff and like never even like think about this stuff again. It's like it's out of my system. You
Right.
know, I don't want to be one of these guys that writes another book about the same subject.
Yeah, but you can't leave it because now you finish it, but then now is the time to actually talk about it. Everybody, it's out in the world. So yeah, it's like I don't know if you retained a lot of that information that you had to learn just to write the book or whatever, but that's a difficult thing too. Because like when I finished my graphic novel, I was like, I just moved on to other stuff. Like I don't when I'm done with one thing, I just like pick up a pen, start working on the next thing, and that's where my head is immediately. So I'm not thinking about what I just did, but then all of a sudden you have to go and talk about it, and
Yeah,
you do interviews and stuff like that, and you're like, I don't really remember anymore. Like I immediately,
right, right. Yeah, people think you remember what you wrote.
yeah,
And I haven't even read the printed copy yet
wow,
because I just like proofread like the PDF so much before going to the printer.
mm,
I was like, I don't even want to read this. I flipped through it. I made there were like spots I wanted to check and everything just to make sure everything was right. But yeah, I haven't even like reread it. I barely looked at it. I'm just like, I just want to fucking deal with it.
well, I have to say, man, it's really well written. I was very impressed with your writing in the book, for sure. And
Thanks.
that's a really challenging thing, especially like as an artist. I feel like I think is it Crumb or somebody said like you're either like a really good artist or a really good writer, and it's just like not really anybody who's like in between.
You throw in like researching as well, and that's kind of like a different skill set. There was like this year-long period where I was just kind of like immersing myself in the subject matter and like amassing reference material
Mm.
and just kind of like taking notes and just like I thought about it every day, but I didn't actually like work on it in the sense that people would think. So there was a very prolonged period of just kind of like getting ready. And then I was living in Philadelphia, and then just kind of like through some sort of like cosmic balance, my wife got a job in Cleveland, and I was like, all right. So as soon as I landed back in Cleveland, like I got to work immediately. And then in the course of working on it, I would stop to do freelance work, things for money, etc.
You're not doing anything? You're done with like cash grab and like romp and trim and stuff like that. Like you're done with those titles.
Yeah, those are dead, completely dead.
You left them with the comics book. What's it called?
Comics company, yeah.
Yeah, you left it with that stuff that's over, and you basically restarted. Like, how did Stone Church come together? I've never heard you talk about that.
Sure. So I've been publishing to the comics company for some time, which was a very good arrangement when I started with him. Because, like, so Dexter runs the comics company on a real shoestring budget. It's a lot of like kind of naughty, like, risque kind of stuff. And I was doing Romp at the time. I had just Xeroxed the first issue. And I remember like kind of bitching that I'd like finished the second one, but didn't even have money to even like get Xeroxes made because I was just a fuck up back then. And Dexter hit me up and he's like, I'll publish this. And I was like, yes, please. Like, I didn't have a website, I didn't know how to do anything. So it
Mhm.
was like, here, you do it. And he would just like handle he'd, get it printed. He operated his website and he just like send me copies so I could like give to my friends or sell when I went to like conventions. And if
Mhm.
I ran out, like, hey, I need more copies, and he'd just mail them to me. And he'd send me like a few, he sent me a little bit of money here and there. It was a very good arrangement at the time. But I started moving in a different direction, and he wasn't really growing his enterprise. And I'm not putting the guy down. He had a day job. He's got kids.
Mhm.
He had his other priorities. And it was just time for me to move on. And I was just like, all right, I thought I'd just like get something set up the way like you do And like I was like, all right, I'll try to get my big book out through a major publisher, and I'll have my own little tiny operation that I can just put out my little side projects.
Mhm.
And I was just like really frustrated with like Big Cartel and all these various sites that people sell through, because like I'd look at like their policies and they're like, we are art, we're the best platform for artists, but we don't allow language that encourages self-harm, or glorifies policing. Or I'm like, hold on, like what does this even mean? Like I have no intention of glorifying the police, but I also don't like being told that I can't. And like, what the fuck is self-harm? Like they don't define it. I'm not going to put all this energy into getting something set up just so I can get canceled for reasons they don't have to explain. I was talking to Jake about it, and he was on Big Cartel, and he's like, it says what? And he's like, fuck these guys. And so we just started to like looking into like, I started looking into getting an actual website, which is not easy. And Jake was asking me questions. He's like, oh, how do I do this? Who do you know? And I was just like, why are we both getting our own website set up? Why don't we just get a website together and just like pool our resources? And and then occasionally we can put something out by other people. We'll like actually make it a small press. And like let's do it right. Let's become an LLC. Let's have a bank account. Let's do like, 'cause we don't know if this is going to get bigger. So like, let's not have to like reverse engineer it. Let's just get everything set up appropriately. And that way we don't have to scramble backwards. And yeah, my plan was still to get like someone else to publish Ain't It Fun, and just nobody wanted it.
I was wondering about that whole process. Like you had the agent, and then he was sending it around to basically everybody.
Yeah.
Would you hear, like, would he tell you, like, here's what this person said about it? The reason they
If
didn't
they
want it?
responded, sometimes we just got ignored,
Yeah.
which like no one owes me any favors. No one is obligated to publish my book. But at this point in my life and career, I think I deserve a no. I
Yeah.
deserve a response. That's what, like, I deserve a polite no, thank you. That's all I ask. So when we get ignored, that fucking pissed me off. I don't like being ignored. You could say no. You can say go fuck yourself. You can say take a hike. That's fine. I just don't like being dismissed. So, and when I say nobody would publish it, we should clarify, nobody of a substantial size would publish it. I could have found somebody smaller to publish it,
Mhm.
but at that point, Stone Church Press was pretty set up. And I was like, well, I'm small and I can put it out. So why should I like have some dinky outfit put it out and like give me like $0
That's
basically?
right. What, uh, you were in Best American Comics 2018.
Yeah, yeah.
What comic did they publish of yours?
That was it was stuff from an issue of Trim. And it was like, this is like kind of like become a cliche now. It was like these like kind of one-page vignettes about like memories from when I was in art school.
Okay. Yeah.
They were kind of like gag oriented.
Mhm. Yeah, but that stuff is great though, man. I love all that the early comics you were doing. Like I told you about this before, like the stuff you did about your dad and everything. Like those are great.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Stone
yeah.
Church reprint that kind of stuff too, man. Like your sequential, like your old work where it's just basically like a
Well, we put out a best of Trim and a worst of Trim.
yeah, but is the worst of Trim like all the porno stuff?
Yeah, for lack of a better term. And the best of is like basically all the autobiographical stuff.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'll pick that up. Are you working on a new book already? You have ideas for a new book?
I'm working on odds and ends. It's going to be an odds and ends kind of year. I've been working on a second issue of Peppermint Werewolf, uh, and some other stuff as well. But I do have an idea for a book that I had a long time ago. I don't really want to get into that because
Yeah,
it's too nebulous.
don't do it yet.
But like, I'm going to start on that in like a year, and I've already got like all my research material, and I'm going to try to keep this one maybe a little like less of a long winding epic and keep it a little more tight, just as an experiment, maybe work on it for 3 years, maybe. I don't know. It could turn into a 1,000-page book. We'll see.
Oh, cool. All right, man. Well, thanks for talking to me. It was great.